Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Akhandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We are now in the 5th chapter, and today we'll do the shlokas 18 to 23. We've completed up to shloka 17 in the last session. So I would like to begin with a little tale today, because it has a moral for us, for what we are doing. So there is this little story from some fable, that once a traveler was going home walking. This was long back, so he was walking, and the road was dark, except for some street lights here and there. A couple of 100 feet away, there would be a street light. So he was walking along, and all of a sudden, under some street light, he saw a man who was crawling on the ground and searching for something, very desperately searching for something. So he stopped and he said, my dear friend, you seem to be troubled. You're looking for something. Can I help you to find it? The man said, well, I didn't want to bother you, but it's like this, that, I bought a ring for my wife this afternoon, and, I put it on my finger going home, and all of a sudden it just slipped and fell off. And so unless I find the ring, I can't go home. That's why I'm searching for it. The man said, okay, then in that case, it's very important. I'll help you. So this traveler as well got down on his knees and he began to help this man. And together they both searched and searched under that light. And after a long time, the traveler said, well, it's nearly an hour we've been searching, and I'm not able to find it. So let me just take a break. So then the man also said, yeah, I mean, this is really taking long. Perhaps the ring is not here under this light. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to give up. I'll just go to the next street light and start searching there. So then this traveler said, well, what do you mean? Hasn't the ring fallen here? You were searching here before I came. What do you mean searching under the next street light? So this man replied, oh, no. The ring didn't fall here. It fell there. He pointed to a spot which was a few 100 feet away in the darkness. He said, it fell there under the darkness. It didn't fall here. What makes you think it fell here? Well, you were searching here. If it fell there, then why are you searching here? Said, I thought that's obvious. How can I search in the dark? I have to search where I can see. So I'm searching under all the street lights. Why are you assuming it fell here? So this man was like, he didn't know what to make sense of it. So this story has a very important moral that, you see, happiness, that's the title of today's talk as well. That happiness is something that we are all constantly searching for. And we keep searching for it. We keep looking for happiness somewhere. We search for it for some time. We experience something that we think is happiness, but that lasts for some time. After that, it fades away. Then we search elsewhere. We look for something different for happiness. Then for some time, that gives us happiness, or it may not also. And then we again go to something else. So happiness is an elusive thing. We've been searching for happiness again and again, but we are not able to find it. We're not able to find that happiness for which we no longer have to search. That is what I mean when I say we're not able to find it. We're not able to find that permanent, lasting happiness which can end our search for happiness. And here is where the Bhagavad-gita comes in. Now, in the story, you can say that, well, if this man had a different paradigm. His paradigm was, I will search where I can see. And because I can see only under the street light, I will search there. Even though I know that the ring fell in the dark, because I can't see under the dark, what's the point in searching there or trying to search there? Now, instead, if the solution given to this man, or if this man had thought of a solution that let me just use a torch and go to the spot where the ring fell, he would have found the ring probably within a few moments, right? But he didn't do that. So it's exactly like that. If we know where to look for happiness and what to use to look for happiness, like in this case, the torch, then we will find that happiness probably much faster, and we won't have to run from pillar to post like we're doing now. That's exactly where the Gita comes in. The Gita is like the torch. The Shastra is the torch. It says in Hitopadesha, Aneka samshayochedi parokshartasya darshakam sarvasya lochanam shastram yasya nasti andha eva saha. So the eye for everything and for everyone is Shastra. If we have the Shastra for what we are looking for example, for it, Bhagavad-gita is a Shastra which tells us how to find happiness. And if we have that Shastra, if we have that eye, the eye enabled by this Shastra, then we will be able to find that happiness much faster than we are able to do now, or we have been successful so far. And that is where the Gita comes in. So let me just go to the shloka that we did in the last class to connect this to what we are saying. In the last class, we've been talking about how the Jnani, he's reached a stage by doing Karma Yoga. His consciousness has been purified. The purpose of Karma Yoga is to develop detachment from this world in a way that is practically possible. We do our duties sincerely, without a cheating mentality, with the mentality of detachment. That is, we do our duty with the sense of duty, that I am obliged to do this work because it's work that has come to me by virtue of my birth or qualification, whatever. But now I'm here, I've been entrusted this duty and I'll do it very, very sincerely. But I'll do it with detachment. The motivation for doing the duty is not the fruit of that work, but rather it is the idea that by doing my duty sincerely, I will elevate myself spiritually. And by that elevation, ultimately, I'll develop that knowledge which will enable me to get permanent mukti. And mukti is the state of happiness. Okay, so this shloka tells us that even at that stage, one needs to perform bhakti. And what is bhakti? Bhakti is when we connect with God, when we connect with Krishna, with Sri Bhagavan. And this shloka explains how do we do that. Tad buddhayaha, tad atmanaha, tan nishtaha, tat parayanaha, gachanti apunaravrittim jnana nirdhuta kalmashaha. Once their impurities are completely removed by virtue of knowledge, this is called chitta shuddhi. Those who engage in contemplation on Sri Bhagavan, on the Ishvara, Krishna, tad buddhayaha. Buddhayaha means their intelligence is contemplating on him, and whose minds are purified and are absorbed in him, tadatmanaha, who are established in their knowledge of his pure nature. Tan nishtaha means their mind doesn't say, okay, today is Monday, I will do Krishna, Tuesday, I will do Hanuman, Thursday, I will do Guru. So there's no changing, there's no lottery system. It's Krishna only. It's fixed in him, and who have taken his refuge and are devoted to his service. Seva. Seva bhava means that whatever I do, this is for his happiness. Okay, when I say his happiness, he, Krishna, includes everything, his entire universe, everything in existence is included in him. So the person who has this seva mentality lives in this world in a manner that is pleasing to the others, does not disturb anybody, does not upset anybody. Devoted to his service, tat parayanaha, attains the state from which he does not return to this samsara, material existence. In other words, he gets mukti and the state of ultimate happiness, eternal happiness. So going forward, in the 18th shloka of the 5th chapter, you see, this is a very, very popular shloka from the Gita, very often cited by scholars. And this addresses the question of, is there discrimination? Religion causes discrimination, we say, right? So after hearing this shloka, all those doubts go away. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini shuni chaiva shvapakecha panditaha samadarshinaha. So the word panditaha means a learned person, a person who is realized, Here in this context, it's referring to the person who has practiced karma yoga, become very mature and developed a proper perspective. So Panditaha is plural, Bahuvachanam. Samadarshinaha is also in plural. Samadarshinaha means has equality of vision. Samadarshi, one who sees everything with an equal vision. Okay, so in this shloka, what is being seen equally? So first is Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane. Brahmana, who is endowed with both Vidya, learning, and humility, Vinaya. Vidya and Vinaya. Vidya Dadati Vinayam. Vidya and Vinaya go together. Person who has really learned also is humble. Okay, so it's only the person who has either partial knowledge or no knowledge who has arrogance also. But the person who really has knowledge has no arrogance, is really humble. So such a Brahmana is item number one. The second item is Gavi. Gavi means go, cow, right? Go Mata. Hastini. Hasti means elephant. Okay, Shuni. Shunaha or Shunakaha means a dog. Cha eva Shvapake. Shvapakaha means one who eats a dog eater. Okay, so 5 things are listed here, 5 items. A Brahmana who is endowed with knowledge and humility, number 1. Number 2, a cow. Number 3, an elephant. Number 4, a dog. Number 5, a dog eater. So all these 5, the Pandita sees equally. He does not discriminate between them. Okay, it's very interesting. So what makes him see this equally? The answer is very simple. Because his realizations show him that in all of them, there's only one Jivatma existing. The Atman, the Jivatman is the same, is identical. Okay, same in the sense, not ontologically the same. It's not only one person. There are 5 different people, 5 different individuals, but they are identical. Only the body is different. Okay, one is sitting in the body, one Jivatma is sitting in the body of a Brahmana who is highly learned, highly respected. The other is in the body of a cow, the other is in the body of an elephant, the other is in the body of a dog, and the other is in the body of a dog eater. 5 different Jivatmas in 5 different bodies, but he sees the Jivatma and not the body. And along with the Jivatma, he also sees the Paramatma sitting in the Jivatma, right? So he sees equality everywhere. And therefore, in his perspective, there's no discrimination between them in his mind. He doesn't say one of them is superior, one of them is inferior. He will treat all of them with equal amount of concern, equal amount of respect in status. Everything for him in his mind is the same. Okay, this is the beauty of this shloka. And therefore, if somebody develops this jnana, naturally, there will be no discrimination in that person's mind. The learned person sees with equal vision a Brahmana endowed with knowledge and humility, a go, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. And Sri Bhagavan has created these differences from the commentaries. I'm bringing these points. According to the karma phala. Why do these differences come? It's not because so this question has been persistent that when we see differences in this world, we see, somebody is in a high status, somebody is in a low status, somebody is suffering, somebody seems to be enjoying, somebody is powerful, somebody is very weak. Okay, different creatures. Some creatures are endowed with enormous amount of luxury or ability. Some creatures are weak by nature. They live in water, or they live underground. They cannot move around like the other creatures can. So why do these differences exist in creation? If you say there is a creator, a God, then obviously the God is partial. The God must be having some, either he's partial or he's whimsical. He's randomly assigning, okay, these Jivatmas will go here, this Jivatma, he's just randomly throwing his dice, right? And by throwing dice, he decides. So the commentators have repeatedly pointed out, no, there's no discrimination. It's only by karma phala, by what we have done in the past, the merits of what we have done in the past, they take us to the different destinations that we experience, right? So therefore, he's not to blame. We are the ones who are responsible for where we are. And why these 5 have been listed? These 5 have been listed not to say that it's only in these 5 that he sees equality. Everywhere else he sees inequality. It's not like these particular 5 have been chosen like that. It is to cover a spectrum in different terms of different categories. For example, in this material existence, we say that all the creation is in terms of the three gunas. The three gunas are the ones that are actually driving the creation and the way it functions, right? So the three gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the brahmana and the go, among the human beings, the brahmana is said to be in sattva guna. He's supposed to be, by his lifestyle and everything. Brahmana who follows the shastra actually lives in sattva guna. Similarly, among the animals, the non-human beings, the go, the cow, when I say cow, the bull is also included. That species, which is called in Latin, it's called Bos indicus. That species is called Bos indicus. In India, there is another species. That's why we call Desi go and Jersey go, right? Desi, Videshi go. Yeah. There's a distinction made. This distinction actually, initially, I also used to think that it's whimsically done. It's a political thing, or people have just created that arbitrarily. But no, there's actually a scientific distinction between them. The Latin name for the animal that we call the go, and we do go puja and we say go mata and so on, that the Latin name for that species is Bos indicus. And for the other species, which is called as the Jersey go or imported go and so on, that is called Bos taurus. Bos taurus. Okay, you can make a note if you like, you can Google on this. Bos taurus. And there's a clear distinction. There are two different species. It's like Homo sapien and say the chimpanzee, which is a different, looks like a human being, but it's not a human being, right? Similarly, that other species is not this one. It looks like the go, and therefore it's also treated like that. We take its milk, we drink its milk, but its milk does not have the same properties as the milk of the Bos indicus species. And that's why we worship. And similarly, it's dung, the cow dung. We say cow dung, gobar, Hindi gobar. That gobar doesn't have the same properties, right? So only the gobar of this animal is used in puja and so on. Otherwise, it's not. So that is said to be in sattva guna. Similarly, among the animals, the hasti, the elephant, is in rajas, has rajasic nature. And the other two, among the human beings, the person who's not following the sattvic principles, eating the meat of all kinds of animals. When you say dog eating the meat of a dog, it does not mean only dog, but it's random. It doesn't have any civilization. It's like uncivilized, completely uncivilized. Shopakaha. It's in tamas, very tamasic life. And among the animals, the dog is said to be in very tamasic kind of a mode. So therefore, this spectrum of these 5 categories of living beings is created to represent the entire variety of living beings, not just these particular 5, but all living beings. Ihaiva tairjita sargo yesham samye stitham manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmat brahmani te stitham. So this shloka talks about how we should situate our mind in God, and that is where happiness lies. The word used for God here is Brahman. So like I've also explained before in the Bhagavatam, it is said, Vadanti tat tattvavidaha tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. 3 labels for that supreme being: Brahma, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Okay, so whenever the word Brahma is used, we should realize it refers to that supreme person, whom we also call as Krishna. Ihaiva tairjita sargo. Here itself, Ihaiva means in this stage, in the stage of sadhana itself, in this even as we are practicing, even before we actually get mukti, even before we are liberated from this birth, from this body, even before that, as we are now, even now itself, it can be considered that we have conquered this existence, this creation, and be situated in equality. If we are able to accept that Brahman is impartial and free from fault. Okay, this is a challenge for many people, because there is always this inherent tendency to blame either someone else among the human beings, or blame God for what is lacking in us, for the faults that we have. Right? But if we are able to genuinely overcome that and say, I am responsible, right, for my thing, then that itself is considered a big step. And such people have conquered this material existence in the stage of sadhana itself. They are situated in Brahman. So primarily 2 things. The Brahman should be free from Vaishamya. Vaishamya means, Vishamata means partiality, right? Vishamata means partiality. Samata and Vishamata, opposites of each other. Samata means equality. So God is always equal. He's never partial. And secondly, he is never cruel. Nairghanyam. Nairghanyam means cruelty. So to absolve him, to say that, no, he is not cruel, my suffering is because of me. And such people experience Brahman even while living in this material body. Vishwanath Chakravarti ends his commentary by saying, Muktis Tesham Sulabha. For such people, eventually getting liberation. Okay, so here the word mukti is used to mean after this life, after we die in this birth, there is no more birth. That is one understanding of mukti. There is no more birth. One more material body is not there. So if there's no more birth, then what happens? And that person lives in eternal consciousness. That person's consciousness is always alive and he is eternally in peace, eternally in happiness. Okay, that is called mukti. So now he continues to describe the state of equanimity in sadhana. This is consciously practiced. Na prahrishyet priyam prapya, na udvijet prapya cha priyam, sthira buddhihi asammudho brahmavid brahmani stitaha. So in the stage of sadhana, how should we train our mind? What should we do as we are spiritually practicing? We are working. See, we are not people who have gone to some cave. We have not left our jobs. The Gita points out that you don't have to do that, right? So it says, simply practice these principles, and one by one, it gives us different principles. So here, a simple principle is given. It says, na prahrishyet priyam prapya. So normally we see in our general life, suppose we get some prize, okay? Then there's a huge amount of celebration. We feel so happy. There's so much happiness. We celebrate, we give a party, we put it on Facebook. Nowadays, social media is the way to express our happiness. Everybody has to see it. So there's so much happiness. And na udvijet prapya cha apriyam. When something goes wrong, okay, something goes wrong. Let's say we failed some exam, or something didn't come on time, something didn't happen the way it should have happened. Then what happens? Then there is so much depression, right? We go into depression. We lock ourselves inside. We don't talk to anybody, or we go and binge. We do binge eating to overcome that depression. Okay, those who are addicted to smoking or drinking, they will then indulge in that to try to get some relief. We are lost. We don't know how to, cope with it. Okay, so now spiritual practices help us to cope with reality better. When someone comes to spiritual life, it is not that just because they are in spiritual life and they are now thinking about God, offering prayers, meditating on some mantra, doing japa. It's not that because they're doing this, immediately all miseries will stop. Okay. Now, whatever happened before earlier, they probably fell down and broke their leg, or something went wrong in the exam, or there was some monetary loss in the business. It's not like these things will suddenly stop. Okay. And now everything will be rosy, and no, not at all. What happens to a normal person happens to someone who is also practicing spiritual life. Okay, then why should I practice spiritual life if whatever happens to that person also happens to me? The answer is this, that when you practice spirituality, you get the perspective to be able to cope with that undulation much, much better. Because you now have a lens through which you can look at the world. You know that when misery comes, that misery will last for some time, and there is some existence which is far beyond that. Your real sense of existence is far above that. Misery will come, sometimes happiness will come. And so this shloka says, when happiness comes, don't celebrate too much. When misery comes, don't get disturbed. Allow it to come, become a witness. It will come, and after some time, it will be gone. Everything in this world is temporary. It comes, lasts for some time, and it goes away. Keep reminding yourself that you are actually a part of that supreme being. You are beyond both happiness and misery. And only when you do that, you become what is called as sthira buddhi. Sthira buddhi means one whose intelligence becomes steady or stable. Okay, and he is asammuda. Sammuda means one who is deluded, who's in delusion, some kind of a false conception of reality. Asammuda means one who knows reality as it is able to see reality clearly, not deluded. Okay, and Brahmavid, he understands Brahman, he understands that Bhagavan. Brahmani stitaha, such a person is situated in Brahman. He is situated in that God because he is having this uniform vision. Okay, so what is the shloka telling us? It tells us that one should train oneself mentally like this. One who knows the Brahman thus as being impartial and not cruel and so on, and is thereby situated in Brahman, has a steady intelligence that is free from delusion. As such, that person neither rejoices upon attaining something pleasant, nor is afflicted upon receiving something unpleasant. So here, in Sanskrit, what is called as vidhiling. In Sanskrit, there are different, dhatus. So actually, there are 6 tenses for each dhatu. Dhatu means a verb, or root verb root. Okay, there are 2,200 dhatus in Sanskrit. And for each of them, there are in active voice and passive voice. So now let's take only active voice. That's called kartari prayoga. In kartari prayoga alone, there are 6 tenses. Okay, there is 1 present tense, 3 past tenses, and 2 future tenses. And then there are 4 moods. Okay, they are called ling. So vidhiling is one of them. Vidhiling is the mood which says, it's called the imperative mood. Okay, so prahrishyet, you can see the word here, prahrishyet. Udvijet means ought not to, or ought to. Na prahrishyet means ought not to celebrate. Na udvijet, ought not to be depressed. So he says, Sri Bhagavan is not only saying, describing a person who has become perfect, he is describing the person who is trying to become perfect. Such a person ought not to allow themselves to become too happy or too depressed. Okay, that is the mood in which this shloka is spoken. So it's an instruction for the person who is practicing sadhana and not a description of the person who has already attained. That's implied. Naturally, if a person is doing sadhana like that, when they become perfect, they will naturally be like that. So moving forward, Bahya sparsheshu asaktatma vindati atmani yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. So this describes the symptom of a person as we progress in our sadhana, then slowly we become more and more detached from bahya sparsha. What is meant by bahya sparsha? Bahya means external. Sparsha means contact. Okay. So asakta. Asakta means detached. So normally in our normal existence, we are dependent on our external contact for our happiness, right? Through our senses, different types of happiness come. And also through our inner senses, it's called antarindriya. Okay, so one is the external indriya, the karmendriya, jnanendriya. But the antarindriya, the mind, the intelligence, our ego, ahankara, okay, all the time is looking for things like appreciation, praise of others. Others should praise us, others should say nice things to us. And this is the attachment that we have. This is how attachment happens in this world or exists in this world. So this shloka is saying, develop detachment. Do not depend upon appreciation of others. If others appreciate, that's fine. Don't say no. But if others don't appreciate also when you do your duty, keep doing your duty. Don't depend on that for your happiness. Being asakta means, being detached simply means that it's not that you become depressed when somebody is not praising you. It's just that it doesn't matter. You become indifferent to it. You are so much driven by a sense of duty. That is why the Bhagavad-gita is quoted, even though most people don't understand that the conclusion of Gita is bhakti. Okay, very few people know that. I don't know why, because it's so obvious. It's so explicitly mentioned in the Gita. So how they miss that, I don't know. But whatever it is, they don't miss one thing. They don't miss the fact that the Gita talks about detachment and doing duty. This everybody says. Everybody, regardless of how they interpret the Gita, this is one thing that's common. And they talk about karma yoga. Karma yoga means detachment. So what is meant by detachment? Detachment means that our sense of happiness, inner happiness, does not depend upon external stimuli. It does not depend upon bahya sparsha. Bahya sparsheshu asaktatma vindati atmani yat sukham. Because of that, he is always experiencing happiness inside. He is completely independent. That's what is meant by saying you don't take ashraya. You don't need the shelter of another person. Sa Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, such a person, when he becomes Yoga Yukta, when he goes forward, when he advances, progresses, and becomes Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, he becomes connected to that Brahman, that supreme being. Then what happens to him? Sukham Akshayam Ashnute. Ashnute means eats, literally. The literal meaning of Ashnute is eats. Okay. Akshayam means that which, jiska shay kabhi nahi hota hai, that which never gets expired, never gets corroded or eroded, never erodes. Okay, Akshaya Patra we say, right? Sukham Akshayam, that is happiness which never becomes eroded. Ashnute, he eats that kind of happiness. Eats means experiences. So such a person who has cultivated himself, cultivated that asakti, from external objects and practiced internal happiness, a person who has practiced internal happiness will eventually, when he becomes a Brahma Yoga Yuktatma, at that point he experiences eternal happiness, endless happiness. Okay, so we all want that, isn't it? So it's so inspiring. One who is detached from the external contacts of the senses with their objects experiences happiness within the self. Such a person, when connected in yoga with Brahman, enjoys unending happiness. So here, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, he makes this comment, he says, Nahi nirantaram amrita aswadine mrittika rochate. Okay, do you understand? It's very straightforward. He says, nirantaram, one who is experiencing nectar. Okay, forget nectar, just say something like gulab jamun. Okay? So suppose I give you gulab jamun and every day I'm giving you things like gulab jamun, rasgulla, and nice sweets. Okay, and then one day I give you some mud. Okay, take here some mud. And will you like it? Obviously not, because you're experiencing something far superior, right? So he says exactly like that. One who experiences that happiness of connected within himself and then eventually connected with that Brahman, with that supreme being, then how can he experience or how can he ever enjoy or how can he ever feel the dependence on sense pleasure for their happiness? Even if you force him, he will not, right? It's so natural for him. So Sri Baladeva then points out that there are two levels of happiness described here. And he says we should be clear about that. One is the happiness of realizing ourselves, the very basic realization that I am different from matter. The Jivatman, I am the Jivatman living in this body. I am not the body. And this Jivatman is different from the body. And that is itself so much happiness giving. And that becomes a realization. It's not merely theoretical, but it's realized by practice of sadhana. But even superior to that is the happiness of connecting with Brahman and living in that Brahman. Okay, this is another famous shloka in the Gita, very, very often cited by commentators. Yehi samsparshida dukkhaha, yehi samsparshida bhogaha, dukkha yonaya evate, adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. So Shri Bhagavan now gives a criterion for intelligence, okay, buddhi, intelligence. He says that samsparshaja bhogaha, samsparsham, contact, samsparshaja, born of contact. Yehi samsparshada bhogaha, those enjoyments, bhoga means enjoyment, happiness or enjoyment, pleasure. Those pleasures which are born of contact of the senses with their sense objects. Dukkha yonaya evate, they are all sources of misery. Okay, he points out. He says that the standard of happiness in this world is essentially based on sense happiness. Okay, happiness of making contact of the senses with their objects. But Sri Bhagavan says that this is the contribution of Bhagavad-gita. It points out that what you think is happiness actually is a source of misery. Dukkha yonaya evate. Why? Because adyantavantaha, adi and anta, that which has a beginning and an end. Adyantavantaha, O Kaunteya, you son of Kunti, na teshu ramate buddha. Buddha means an intelligent person. Na teshu ramate. He does not take pleasure in them. Okay, he does not plan. Okay, normally, how do we plan for happiness? How do we, for example, think? Let's say there is a dinner. We've been invited for a dinner. Then we know the dinner is, say, 2 nights away. And each time the thought of the dinner crosses our mind, it causes a flash of happiness. Oh, there'll be a nice dinner. There'll be 20 items. There'll be 3 fried items, 2 sweets. There'll be 4 sabjis. Those who eat non-veg will also say there'll be chicken. Butter chicken will be there. So this kind of contemplation, right? We live in that. Even before the dinner comes, we've already experienced the happiness of contemplation on anticipated happiness. Okay, that also is a form of happiness. But is that a very intelligent thing to do? We normally think it is, right? But in the Bhagavad-gita, it says, no, that is not intelligent. Intelligence does not mean contemplating on happiness. Intelligent people don't contemplate on this form of happiness. They don't contemplate on this form of happiness. Instead, they contemplate on a much higher form of happiness. The pleasures obtained through the contact of the senses with their objects are only sources of misery. So this is the reason, because you know that when you go to that form of happiness, what happens? The simple logic is you become attached to it. And attachment is the source of misery, for future misery. Okay? Present pleasure, future misery. Later on, when we go to the 18th chapter, Sri Bhagavan, when he talks about, this is in the 14th chapter, when he talks about the three gunas of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, he will also point out that under the influence of Sattva Guna, when Sattva Guna is binding us, then it gives this detachment. Sattva Guna is favorable to this detachment and knowledge, jnana. And therefore, it also gives happiness. Being in Sattva, because it also produces detachment, it also produces happiness along with it. Happiness comes naturally with detachment. So he says, what appears like poison in the beginning. Okay, detachment, the idea of detachment is painful in the beginning because we don't know what it is. And it looks like, I have to give up something that gives me so much pleasure. I have to give it up. Does it make any sense? I don't believe in it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Right? So it's painful. It's like visham. It's like poison in the beginning. So here Sri Bhagavan points out, he says that which is like poison in the beginning, but like nectar in the end. Okay, take a simple example of fasting. Okay, fasting is a way to develop some detachment from the pleasure of taste, right? The pleasure that we get through the tongue. Now, in the beginning, somebody is asked to fast. It looks so difficult because they've never done it before, right? And so, how can I go without, can I live? I mean, won't I, will I faint? So much fear. And it looks so painful. It looks so, imagine that I'll be able to fast looks difficult. But if somebody actually does it and goes through that difficulty of fasting, okay, let's say even simple fasting, let's say you eat only fruits, may not be complete fasting. You abstain from your normal food, just eat fruits for a day and maybe some water along with the fruits, refrain from things like coffee, tea, milk, etc. The next day, you experience that lightness. You suddenly feel that your body is much lighter, your clarity, there's so much more clarity in your thinking, isn't it, Rakshit? There's so much the inner sense of peace in the mind. What would have been otherwise disturbing. And the opposite is also true. Suppose you go and eat heavily. Let's say you go to a party and you lose control and just go on eating. And you eat a lot of things. You have no idea what you ate. At the end of it, you come back and you're not able to think. You don't know what to do. You go and just fall on your bed. And then you don't know when you fell asleep. You get up at a very maybe 7 o'clock in the evening. So you don't know whether it's time to sleep or time to be awake. You're confused. You don't know what to do. You're lost. So this is the opposite. When you've indulged yourself in the senses, it leads to a situation when the mind is not able to think clearly. You feel heavy. You're bogged down. Somebody says something, you get angry very quickly. You lose your temper, right? Irritation, you become very irritable. So the opposite of that. You can see how clearly on a spectrum they map out as two ends of the spectrum. So this is very practical philosophy. It's not something that is theoretical. It's not something that is esoteric. Some people think the Gita is too esoteric for me. It's not at all esoteric. It's actually very practical, very real. If you practice it, you realize it's very, very real. Shaknoti iheva sodo. So Shri Bhagavan concludes this set of shlokas by giving a very useful advice. He says, Shaknoti iheva yas sodum prak sharira vimokshanat kama krodhodbhavam vegam sa yuktaha sa sukhi naraha. He says, one who is able to tolerate, okay, sodhum means to tolerate. Prak sharira vimokshanat, before giving up this body. Okay, so one day we have to all give up our respective bodies, right? It may not be now, it may be a long time from now. But whatever it is, however long it is, it has to happen one day, right? But before we give up this body, if we are able to tolerate what? Kama, Krodha, Udbhavam, Vegam. The forces of two things, Kama and Krodha. Okay, earlier in the 3rd chapter, Sri Bhagavan had told Arjuna that this is the enemy that is actually the worst enemy that you have, which is actually causing all the misery to you. And that's known by two names, Kama and Krodha, lust and anger. So, he says, if you are able to tolerate that enemy, Kama, Krodhodbhavam, Vegam, sa yuktaha, sa sukhi naraha. If you're able to tolerate the force of anger and the force of lust. Okay. So here also, please note that he's not saying that if you begin sadhana, then immediately all your kama and krodha will go away. Okay. If he had said that, if that is true, and if he wanted to go by that, then he wouldn't have said you must tolerate them. Because if they're not there, then why do you need to tolerate them? Right? You need to tolerate something which is there. Right? Which means even after we begin sadhana, well into the stage of sadhana, even after years of sadhana, kama and krodha are still present. They are not something that go away overnight. They become weaker. They become weaker and weaker. But they become weaker and weaker when we consciously learn to tolerate them, when we attempt to say that, no, I will not lose my temper. Okay, the opportunity to lose temper will come every day. Every now and then, something will happen. Okay, for example, a simple thing like the computer opens, but the software doesn't load. Okay, I'm pressing on that software, but how much ever I click, I go on clicking. 100 times I click, but the software doesn't open. Actually, we should not click so many times, first of all. But because we lose control, we get angry, we click, go on clicking, and the computer finally hangs, right? And then we get even more angry. In our mind, we abuse that person. We abuse somebody because we have to blame someone. So this is exactly what he's saying, that when there is an opportunity for anger, okay, every day there are opportunities for anger. And he says, just tolerate the anger. Talk to yourself and say, no, I will not get angry. I will allow this situation to pass. Whatever happens, I'll allow the situation to pass. Things will be better after some time. Okay. Kama krododbhavam vegam. Kama, all the desires that we have, different types of enjoyment. Okay. Like, for example, a simple thing. I'm giving simple examples. It's easy to understand. Between two meals, you go and feel like putting something in the mouth. Okay. You know, if somebody asks you, suppose an exam you're answering questions. Is it a good thing to keep eating in between two meals? You will also answer, no, it's not a good thing because you know it. But then even though we know it, we still do it, right? And this is exactly what he's saying. He's saying, tolerate that urge. Just hold on, put a break on it and remind the mind that, okay, now I ate my breakfast at 8 o'clock and the lunch is at 1 o'clock. If I allow that 5 hours to go without putting anything in between, then my system will work best. When my system works best, then my mind will work best. My mind works best, my work will happen best, right? My meditation will happen best. Everything will happen in the best possible way. And so talk to yourself. How do you tolerate? You tolerate by talking to yourself. You talk to yourself, talk to the mind. This is a yatna purvak, but it's not like it'll automatically happen. Just because somebody gave you a japa mala and you started doing japa, automatically things don't fall into place. Well, to some extent they do. Some extent you'll find the force of kama and krodha becoming weaker as you do japa and so on. But you still have to consciously endeavor. You have to consciously talk to yourself, consciously push yourself and say, no, I will not do it. And this is a way to strengthen ourselves. Each time, it's just like we go to the gym and we lift a weight, right? Why do we lift a weight? Because we create resistance for the muscle. And why do we do that? Because when we create resistance for the muscle repeatedly, then that gives us context for the muscle to build itself. Right? The muscle, then the body, something in the body recognizes that some growth is required and the growth will happen. Exactly in the same way, our spiritual growth happens when we consciously apply resistance here and say that, no, I will not do this. I will tolerate my anger. I will tolerate my lust and so on. And what is the outcome of that? Sri Bhagavan says, sa yuktaha, sa sukhi naraha. One who is able to tolerate the urges of desire, kama, and anger, krodha, while living in the body and before leaving it, is properly situated in yoga and is a happy person. So the point is this, that Bhagavad-gita is a very, very practical book. It's not merely philosophy. You can see how I've tried to summarize these points, and I'm sure that after hearing all this, you also will give me points of your own. Practice equality of vision. Treat all living beings, not only human beings, with dignity and respect. Right? Every being is a part of Sri Bhagavan. And this vision actually is the basis for prema. Ultimate goal of life, Mahaprabhu pointed out, is prema. That's the ultimate. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in that particular form, says Krishna came in that form because he wanted to go beyond the desire for mukti. Mukti is what Bhagavad Gita talks about, but there's something even higher than mukti, and that is prema. Prema means that pure, genuine love. And this equality of vision that is spoken of in the Gita is actually a basis for that prema. Contemplate on Sri Bhagavan being impartial and take full responsibility for all suffering. Okay, and also this contemplate on, this is something that we have to remind ourselves every now and then, that our real happiness is inside of us and not outside. And indulging in sense enjoyment comes in the way of that realization. So therefore, we cannot give up. You see, when we say sense enjoyment is a source of misery, okay, what does it mean? If tomorrow onwards, I stop, I live a very bland life. I won't put any more salt in my food. I will eat cold food because, warm food will give me pleasure. So I'll eat cold food. No, that's not the way it works. What it means is basically we regulate. Now, it's also said that among the different types of pleasures that we can possibly get entangled with, some people say that sex desire is difficult to control, right? The desire to have sex with the opposite gender. But actually, many saintly people point out that even more fundamental than that, even more difficult than that to control is a sense of taste. Even sex desire is dependent on this particular organ, the organ called the tongue. If we are able to control this organ called the tongue, in two ways. One is the taste aspect, the other is the speaking, the urge to speak, relentlessly speak and talk about ourselves. See, generally the tendency is to talk about ourselves. When somebody comes, start talking about ourselves. I did this, I did that. If we are able to tolerate that urge, then automatically the other senses fall in line, they fall in place. Okay, so even the desire for sex, that also becomes very weak if we're able to control the sense of taste. So regulate sense enjoyment, doesn't say overnight you can give it up. Instead, you learn to regulate it, discipline it. Contemplate on the life. So see, generally, how does enjoyment pervade? How does enjoyment spread? How does the desire for enjoyment come? The desire for enjoyment grows when we see others enjoying, right? For example, you go on the road, you see a cinema poster, and you'll see some people in a very, scantily clad, and they're all looking like they're enjoying in some way. Then you also feel, okay, I should also experience that, right? So, like the story of Ajamila, it's Ajamila going through a forest, and he sees this man and this woman enjoying themselves, and they are in a very loose kind of behavior. And he then develops that desire, and he becomes a victim of that. So, in the same manner, if we contemplate on the saintly people, the people who are living, so there are so many people who are living a very austere life. And for some of us in our own families, we see our parents or our grandparents or great grandparents, when we talk about them, we can see that they led such a simple life and they were so content, they were so happy, non-complaining. So how is it possible? Is it possible for me also to live like that? So contemplating on them, contemplating on how they lived their lives is enough for us. It's a very good beginning. It's a very good way to begin and give us traction on this path. We get very good traction when we think of such people. And that's the way to begin the regulation of sense enjoyment. And we saw this, practicing the tolerance to anger, visualizing happiness. Particularly when we visualize happiness for the people who have insulted us, who have made us unhappy, if we're able to genuinely visualize happiness for them, but not tell them, okay, this is completely internal. Visualize happiness for someone who has hurt you, but don't tell the person. With that person, you behave normally. Don't behave as if you suddenly become his friend. And because you heard in the Bhagavad-gita class that you should visualize their happiness. So tomorrow you go to, oh hi, how are you? Let me embrace you and forgive you. No, not that. Externally, nothing. Externally, don't show anything to them. Externally, they should just think you are what you are. Let them still abuse you. It's okay. But internally, visualize, and they should not know that you are visualizing happiness for them. If you're able to do that, then you will see how all anger will go away. You'll become completely free from anger. Okay, this is power. This is called Ramya Upasana. Ramya Upasana means sweet Upasana, Upasana which gives sweetness. And this produces sweetness in the mind. So I was reading this beautiful story, and it's actually very connected to what we were discussing today, of how, it so happened that Krishna ended up on the side of the Pandavas in the war, Kurukshetra war. So the story begins with the end of the Vanavas. Okay, so at the end of the Vanavas, they are supposed to spend 1 year in Ajñātavas, the 13th year. So 1 year of Ajnatavas is spent in the kingdom of Virat Maharaj, right? And the Virat Maharaj's kingdom, it is still there today. That place is called Virat Nagar, that capital of his city where his palace was. It's called Virat Nagar. It's located between Delhi and Jaipur. So the way from Delhi to Jaipur, if you go, is slightly off the highway. It's in Rajasthan, and that place was also called Matsya, the kingdom of Matsya Desh. So here, Ajnatavas is almost over, and towards the end of the Ajnatavas, the Ajnatavas just gets over. There is this Duryodhana tries to do his usual, some mischief, and then the Pandavas get involved with it. They are not yet revealed as Pandavas. They are still in that disguise, but they have to protect Virat Maharaj because they are under his shelter. So all of them go forward, and because they are so capable, they easily are able to handle Duryodhana's, whatever he's doing, and resolve the problem for Maharaj Virat. So then the Ajnatavas is over, but Duryodhana and his team, when they realize that these are the 5 Pandavas who have fought against us now, they do their politics and they say that, okay, before Ajnatavas got over, we have found you. And the condition was that because you're not supposed to reveal yourself before that period. Now you have to again go back into this. Okay, so all that is invalid. Your kingdom cannot be given back to you. So now, after this incident happens, there's an assembly in the palace of Virat, and Krishna presides there. Krishna is there, Virat Maharaj is there, and Drupada Maharaj is there, the father of Draupadi. They're all seniors, the senior elderly people, and the Pandavas also are there, and there are several other kings who have assembled there, and they're all discussing, now what next? Now, actually, as far as we are concerned, the Ajnatavas is over, and we're supposed to go back and get the kingdom. We're supposed to be ruling the kingdom. But it's very clear from Duryodhana's behavior that he is not going to give this kingdom back to us. It's very clear. So even before talking to him, they know that there is going to be a war. The only way that we can get the kingdom back and do our job is to wage a war with him. And so they look forward. And immediately then Krishna says, if that is going to happen, then the next course of action should be to seek support from all the kings. So he says, before this goes out from here, the moment our assembly closes, the news will reach Duryodhana that we are talking about getting support for the war. We are planning for a war. And he will then start also talking to the kings. Now, if you see the situation at that time, these people are ruling from Hastinapura and Indraprastha. Indraprastha was supposed to be the place where the Pandavas were ruling. Hastinapur is near Meerut. What is today's Meerut? There's also a town called Hastinapur even today existing there. And that's where this place, the capital of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, they were there. And Indraprastha is Delhi, where is today is Delhi. And that's where the Pandavas were ruling before they were sent on the Vanavas. Okay, so they were 2 different places. You can say Delhi to Meerut is how far? Maybe 100 odd kilometers. So that distance was separating them. So these people are supposed to go back to Indraprastha. And now there's supposed to be war. So Krishna says, start talking to all the allies, but do that before Duryodhana and the team does. So immediately, as soon as the assembly is dissolved, so Krishna says that I'm going to go back to Dwaraka. Okay, and he leaves for Dwaraka. They bid him farewell. And these people, they immediately start talking to all their allies. They send messengers everywhere. Okay. Meanwhile, the news also reaches Duryodhana. Spies go and tell him that this is what has been discussed. You should also look for your allies. So he also sends out messengers. Okay. Now what happens? Both of them, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, they want Krishna to be on their side. Okay, because the main reason is Krishna, from Duryodhana's perspective, has got a huge army of the Gopas. Okay, and each Gopa, it's called the Narayani Sena. Yeah, Narayani Sena. It's Krishna's army. And each of them is called a Narayana, that Gopa, because he's supposed to be like Krishna himself. He's as strong as Krishna. So Duryodhana immediately sets out personally. He says, Krishna is a person that I should personally talk to. I should convince him. He's actually a cowherd boy, but he's got such a big army and he's ruling in Dwaraka. He's got so much wealth and grandeur about him. He likes grandeur. So I should go there and somehow catch him before the Pandavas go there. In the meantime, the Pandavas, they have dispatched Arjuna. And Arjuna is on the way to meet Krishna. So on the one hand, Krishna is moving towards Dwaraka, and both of these people, one person from Hastinapura and one person from Viratnagar, two people are chasing Krishna. And it so happens that they both reach the place where Krishna is now camping. He's still not reached Dwaraka, but he's camping on the way. They both reach the place exactly at the same time. And Duryodhana sees that, so he hastens himself and he enters the tent of Krishna first. He enters first, and immediately after him, Arjuna enters the tent. When they both enter the tent, they find that Krishna is sleeping on his bed. He's peacefully sleeping on his bed. So, which means they can't talk to him at that point of time. Then what to do? Duryodhana sees a big simhasan, a royal simhasan kept near the head of Krishna. So he goes and plumps himself on that. Just sits there. Okay, good. Now let Krishna wake up and I'll talk to him. There is no other chair. And anyway, Arjuna being Arjuna, he straightaway goes to the feet of Krishna and he stands there with folded arms. Looking at the feet, he just stands there and waits for Krishna to wake up. So after some time, Krishna wakes up. And when he wakes up, because he's lying in that posture, his head is looking downwards, he first sees Arjuna because he's looking towards his feet. He first sees Arjuna. He says, "Oh, Arjuna, you're here." And the moment he wakes up, Duryodhana also realizes that he is woken up and he's come here to ask for something. So he doesn't want it to go to Arjuna. So immediately he starts talking. Even before he is asked to talk, he starts speaking. He says, "Krishna, you are such a dharmic character. And you've been with us since our childhood. You know us. And I've come to you for support. There's going to be a war. And if there is a war, I want you and your army to be on my side." So Krishna looks at him and he says, Duryodhana, I've heard you. Then Duryodhana says, Krishna, see, Arjuna also has come here for the same thing. But I entered the tent first before Arjuna. Because I entered first, there's a niyam which says that the person who comes first should be given that preference. And he should be given, you should be giving the army to me and not to Arjuna. So Krishna says, Duryodhana, look, you may have come first, I agree, but it's Arjuna that I saw first. When I opened my eyes, I took cognizance of him first, and then I noticed that you were speaking. And then I know that you are here. So therefore, I want to also take into consideration that he was in my vision first. But I don't want to deny you what you are asking for. And therefore, I will do like this. I'll give you both two options. Option one is my whole army. The entire Narayani Sena will be on one side. And this has 10 million warriors, 10 million gopas. And each of them is as capable as I am. They're all powerful. They're like made of iron. And they will all fight their best. They'll give their best and they'll fight in the war. So one of the sides will have that army. One of you can choose that. And the other person will get me alone. I'll be alone. That is option two. You can have me alone. And you can have me, but there's a condition that. Condition is that I will not fight, whichever side I am. And I will not even lift a weapon. Forget about fighting. I will not even lift a weapon. I'll just be there on that side. Okay, now who will choose first? He says there's a niyam which says that the person who is younger should always be given the first priority. And between the two of you, Arjuna is younger. He's younger than Duryodhana by 1 year. So he says, Arjuna, you go first. Which one do you want of these two? Now, Duryodhana's heart is beating because he's like, it's gone now. Okay, I've lost the toss. But Arjuna does what Duryodhana wants to hear. Arjuna has no doubt in his mind. When the moment Krishna finishes his giving the two options, immediately he says, I want option B. I want you, Krishna, on my side. Duryodhana is so delighted with that. He says, wow, can't believe this. He was given the first choice and he has picked Krishna. And the whole army is now mine. So he says, Krishna, I'm so happy. I will have your whole army. Thank you so much for this support. So he goes back and he is completely delighted. He's so thoroughly delighted. After he goes back, Krishna turns to Arjuna. He says, Arjuna, I gave you the option of choosing my entire army, but you chose me. What was your logic? There must be some thinking by which you chose me. Arjuna says, Krishna, I have no doubt in what I chose. There was no need to think for it. He says, where you are there, obviously victory is guaranteed. You are equivalent to more than all this put together. He says, Krishna, please be my charioteer. You said you will not fight. I don't want you to fight, but just be my charioteer. And that shloka, there are 3 shlokas he speaks, Arjuna, in the Mahabharata, in the original Mahabharata. And in the first 2 shlokas, he says that, essentially he says that you, wherever you are everything in existence. And there is no need of any army to achieve what is required with the army. And in the third shloka, he says that, be my charioteer and guide me. And I have always wanted this in my life. Okay. Now that shloka has got a very deep philosophical meaning. It says basically that physically being charioteer is one thing, but here being charioteer means being the guide, being the permanent guide. And that has a very, very deep message for us. It says that in whatever we do, for example, now we're talking about sadhana, right? We're saying that we want to practice spiritual sadhana, we want to spiritually purify ourselves, we want to eventually get that pure knowledge, etc. And who's the guide for that? The guide is Krishna. It's only he who can actually guide us. Okay. So, of course, Krishna appears as the guru externally. We say the guru is even before Krishna because it's the guru that we can see and talk to. And the guru is one we worship as Krishna. But internally, Krishna is the one who guides us from inside. By the guru's blessings, we are able to get the guidance of Krishna. And so every moment, this teaches us that we have to take his shelter, take his guidance, ask his guidance. At least at the time, if not when we are happy, but when we are, say, confused, depressed, we don't know what to do. It could be even something as simple as, okay, there's an exam tomorrow, and there is so much to prepare. And I haven't prepared anything, or I have prepared partially, and now I don't know, I just have 3 hours before I sleep. In these 3 hours, what is the best thing to do? Even for something as mundane as that, right? It's not a big decision, investment decision in life. There's something very mundane, temporary, momentary. But even for something momentary as that, if we are able to turn to Krishna and say, Krishna, please guide me. What is the best way I can spend these 3 hours? Please guide my thinking that I will be able to do the justice that I can do. That is enough. That is bhakti. That is where we practice bhakti and connect with him and take his shelter. Right? And that is what this story teaches us. It's pertinent to also add, this one small point I'll add and finish the story, that in the Kurukshetra war, the strength of the armies, you see, Duryodhana focused only on building the strength of the army because he's completely blind. And this one factor that made all the difference, the single factor of Krishna being present on the Pandava side was the factor which made the difference between the outcome. He just couldn't see that. He couldn't understand that at all. His army was 11:7. Pandava's army had 7 Akshauhinis. Okay, and the Kaurava's army had 11 Akshauhinis. So the difference was 11:7, like almost 1.5. They are more than 1.5 times size of this, 1:1.5. But nothing, right? So that's the point being made. And it's not about material power, it's about that wisdom which comes from inside, which guides us. Good. So shall we close for today? We'll say the final prayers and close. So we have a Shanti mantra which we chant from the Veda. Om Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnururukkramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Rutam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadbhaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram Om Shanti 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 Hari Om.